Good morning, everyone. My name is Travis, and this is my case presentation. I will be discussing a client who was discharged from treatment due to repeated rule violations, but was later reinstated after appealing the decision. This case is pretty loaded, and it asks questions about ethical, procedural issues, fairness, staff accountability, program enforcement, and let's get into it. So, the client's name is obviously protected for um, anonymity. So the client's name in this case that I was using is Joe Smith. He resides in our halfway house. He was very good in the program, always compliant with all the rules, always did his chores, went to work, didn't bother anybody. But he repeatedly broke a rule where he would go to this one NA meeting where his family lived, and there was a staff member who allowed this many, many times, and we were unaware that the staff member was allowing it to happen, which probably contributed to the situation, which most likely did. It did. The client was discharged, and during the discharge process, I was handling it. I didn't want to see this client get put out on the street at 10 o'clock at night. I didn't think it was right, especially after uh, the behaviors happened the day before. And I informed him that he could appeal his discharge. It's right there in the client bill of rights. Most of the clients are not aware of it. I informed him because I didn't think it was right, and that this other staff member was also allowing it to happen, which was unethical. Probably a lot of other things. Uh, and this is not the only client he allowed to deviate from this meeting. It came to light that there was a few other clients that he was allowing to walk to the store and do all kinds of other things. And then you're dealing with fraternization and favoritism and many other things of that nature. And I was worried that when I informed him it was right to appeal, that I was going to get flack for it, um, because tensions were running high. And then the director said to me the next day, he was like, "Well, you could have called him up and told him to appeal his decision in the morning because we didn't want anything to happen." But uh, I didn't think it was the right thing to do. So we took the client to a hotel room where he stayed the night, and then he came back the next morning and he spoke to the clinical director and the executive director, and they allowed him to come back into the program. So moving on. So it raises this case does raise some ethical and policy concerns. Ethically, we must consider whether the client was treated fairly and whether the staff actions influence the outcome. As far as policy goes, it highlights inconsistencies in rule enforcement and the need for clear staff guidelines. So, uh, you look at the slide here. Were other clients discharged for similar reasons? Yes, and I don't think they were aware of the appeal process because no one ever told them about them, even though it's in plain writing everywhere. And I've seen people get discharged for less offenses that they probably had a right to appeal that decision. And I just I want to see my clients do the best for themselves. And outside of him deviating from this NA meeting where he wasn't using and he was just trying to see his family and his kids, I didn't think it was a big issue where it probably was, because we're accountable for him. And if something had happened and we allowed him to leave, what if he was driving in the car and his family got into an accident, or whatever the case may be, we would be held liable. So in retrospect, uh, it was probably more of a big deal than it made it out to be. But I didn't want to see this guy get discharged to the street and then go out and use again. So he was essentially homeless. His family lives with his in-laws, and there's no room for him at the house there, and he's working on trying to get housing for him and his family. So I just wanted the best possible outcome for him. But moving on. So the social work values and ethics. The National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics provides a framework for analyzing this case. As social workers, we must balance program structure with the client's needs while ensuring fairness, accountability, and adherence to ethical principles. So the client was leaving the meeting to see his family because Freedom House has this requirement and able to have visits that the family do family education, and his family is unable to attend those. So he was just trying to circumvent the system, and he really wanted to see his family, and it's unfortunate that this is the route that he felt he had to go. But now that he's readmitted, he's aware of the situation, and he knows that anything else he does, if he goes left instead of walking right, whatever minor thing it is, he's probably out on the street regardless. So it's a very delicate situation, and I don't know what's going to happen next. I believe in him. I think he's going to do well. So anyways, the staff member, he allowed this client to violate program rules multiple times. He did not inform the clinical team of what had transpired before, because we heard from the clients what had happened, and then they got to the staff member and said, yeah, that happened, but I forgot to report it because another client had an asthma attack and I had to take him from the meeting. So that's what he did, and the other clients thought it wasn't right that Joe was being showed favoritism by this staff member, and so it's the staff member, as far as I know, has been placed on leave, maybe pending termination. It remains to be seen. So, and another thing, he didn't report it immediately because it had to probably happen multiple times, and he didn't want to be caught in a crossfire, but ultimately it happened. And the ethical question here is, should staff apply flexibility, or must rules always be strictly enforced? I'm in the former. I think there should be some flexibility in the rules. Nothing ever is cut and dry, and there's always case by case situations that have to be addressed. So let's go. Moving on to the next slide. From the client's perspective, why did he break the rule? He wanted to maintain familial bonds with his family. He had not seen them during treatment. His family was not able to attend these family education sessions. He probably felt that he needed his family connection for his emotional well-being. Did he follow proper protocols? No. He was actually aware of what the proper protocols were, and he decided to not follow them anyway. And was the discharge fair? That's a hard question to answer. I think the timing of the discharge wasn't fair because it was just sudden. It was the next day after the event had transpired. It was late at night. He had nowhere to go, and there was many other things that could have happened while he was gone for the 12 or 14 hours, however long it was gone before he was readmitted to the program. He could have went out. He could have used again. A lot of things could have happened. So I'm actually happy to see Joe back in the program, and I think he's going to do well from here on out. So let's move on to the next slide. The appeal process and outcome. The appeal process ensured due process for the client. The review likely considered whether the punishment was appropriate, whether similar cases were treated the same way, and the role of staff involvement. Ultimately, he was reinstated to the program. Uh, Many clients weren't happy about that decision, and they vocalized their concerns, and they think that this particular client is being shown favoritism. But now I think there is a precedent that has been set where if clients feel their discharge wasn't fair, they are aware of the process to go ahead and try to appeal in a discharge. And ultimately, I think the program is probably better for it because I think clients weren't aware of this right to begin with. So therefore, there was probably a lot of discharges that were probably questionable, that probably needed more eyes on it, and that's that's what happened in this case. So, and staff involvement definitely played a role in him being reinstated, because how can he hammer the client when he was just, even if the client was aware that he was breaking the rules, if you allow it to happen, you set a precedent, and this precedent cannot be set. So, moving on. Was this an ethical dilemma? It's both an ethical dilemma and a procedural issue. The ethical dilemma arises from the balance between rules and individual circumstances, while the procedural issue concerns the lack of consistent enforcement and staff accountability. As previously stated, the staff just allowed things to continue to happen. It wasn't just with this client, as stated before, it was with other clients, and there's just many things that the staff wasn't doing that he should have been doing. So, moving on to the next slide. So, my discussion questions here, I have 3, but you only have to answer 2. Any one of your choosing, doesn't matter. So, the first question is, was the initial discharge fair? Why or why not? What role should staff play in enforcing rules? Strict adherence or case-by-case flexibility? And how should programs handle staff members who don't enforce rules properly? So, moving on. So, in conclusion, the case highlights ethics and policy. It underscores the importance of due process, need for staff accountability, and the need of fair and consistent rule enforcement and treatment programs. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy it. Take care. Looking forward to your feedback. Thank you.